Welcome to the Real Talk with Megan podcast, where we have candid conversations about the things that matter most. I'm your host, Megan, and we're going to deep dive into the topic of mental health. Together, we'll work to destigmatize mental health and start conversations. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready for a real and raw conversation about mental health on the Real Talk with Megan podcast. I'm so excited to have my guest here with me today. Her name is Rachel Kerr Schneider. I said that correctly, right?
You did.
Perfect. We talked about that before. I was making sure I get it all right. I would love for you just to introduce yourself to all the listeners, just a little snippet of who you are. I know we're going to get into your story more a little bit later on, but just a little bit about who you are.
Well, thank you, Megan, for having me. And yes, I think in a nutshell, I'm a gal that's lived a lot of life. I'm 62 years old. I currently reside in Dallas, Texas. I'm a mom. I'm a bonus mom. I'm a yaya. And I'm a newly published author of a memoir called The Widow Chose Red. And I'm here today to kind of talk a little bit about that story and my faith journey along those lines. But yeah, I've lived all over the place, and I'm very excited to share a little bit about my journey with Jesus, John, and ALS.
Well, and May is National ALS Awareness Month, also National Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm going to throw that out there because that's my jam, right? I think this is an amazing topic, and you have an amazing story to share. And so we'll just start with the basics. You talked about ALS. What is that for people who are not aware?
Yes, don't feel bad if you don't know what it
Yeah.
is, because I didn't. And the actual pronunciation is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. That's a mouthful.
I'm glad
People,
you said it, not me.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And so ALS for short, or otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And Lou Gehrig was a famous baseball player who was diagnosed with this disease, and he died within 2 years of his diagnosis. And because of his celebrity status, they attached his name to this disease.
Okay.
And so he was a great person, great athlete, just a good man. And this disease took him in the prime of his life. It also takes a lot of other people. So ALS is basically a disease in which the motor neurons, which carry the signals from the brain to the muscles, die.
Mm.
So the muscles atrophy, and it paralyzes a person. You actually just self-paralyze. Yet in the midst of all of this, your brain stays perfectly good.
Mm.
So you are aware of everything that is happening to your body. Imagine having an itch on your nose and not being able to lift your hand to
Wow.
scratch it. You need to turn over at night to get comfortable. You can't move. And it's still statistically very rare. Between 5,000 and 5,500 people a year are diagnosed in the US. Currently, there are about 30,000 people in the United States that are, I say, quote, living with ALS. It is a progressive terminal disease. My husband was diagnosed 17 years ago, and there is still to this day no known cause or cure. So when you get this news, and most people have been symptomatic for some amount of time, they've been trying to figure out. My husband was over a year.
Mm.
Most people who suffer from this, it takes a while to figure out what is actually going on. But when you do, you've got between 2 and 5 years, and very few people statistically go beyond that.
Wow.
So I love the fact that you said this is also Mental Health Awareness Month, because just imagine if you were to get this kind of news, what that does to your mental health. It rocks your world. And knowing that there is no cure it puts it in a different place. And it's hard. It's really, really difficult. So even now, John's been with Jesus now for 14 years, and it's still the community is very small because we all suffer. Not one of us gets out of this life unscathed, but ALS is
Mhm.
particularly brutal in the way that it diminishes the body.
Yeah. I mean, that leads me to my next question. Obviously, you're very passionate about it. So there's a connection there, and you just talked about with your husband. And so you can talk about that connection a little bit, but just kind of how it affected you and your family and all of that during that time.
Well, yeah, it came from out of the blue. We were young. My husband was 47 years old when they finally figured this out. He was, we were a church going, Jesus loving family. We were blessed. We were living a great life. I had two young boys, and this news really blindsided us, and it just puts you're just numb. You just go numb for a long, long time. And we made a decision not to tell our boys right away because they were so young at the time. They were 7 and 10 when their
Wow.
father was diagnosed. And he wasn't symptomatic. His foot had dropped and he wasn't as strong in that leg, but you had to look really closely
Mm.
because John just looked great. After about a year, it became clear something's wrong with daddy. So we sat the boys down and decided to tell them. We had taken that time, though, within that year to kind of get ourselves in a place. We knew once the boys knew and the rest of the community knew, there would be an outpouring of support, and we needed to be ready for that. And so when we told the boys, my youngest son, we told them that daddy's sick. He has a disease that's going to make it hard for him to walk and to talk. And my youngest son, Jake, looked at us and said, is daddy going to be in a wheelchair?
Mm.
And yes, daddy's going to be in a wheelchair. Is daddy going to be able to get out of the wheelchair?
Yeah.
No, probably not. Well, is daddy going to get better?
That's hard.
It's so hard. And I looked at both of my boys and just said, you know what? We are going to pray every night. If God wants to make daddy better, he absolutely will do this. In the meantime, we're going to do
Mm.
everything we can to make daddy comfortable and to just live the best way that we can and take good care of daddy. And at that point, that when kids are that young, that's about all they can
Yeah.
handle. You don't need to give them all of the other information. And yet we knew as soon as they started talking to their friends and said, my daddy's sick, he has this thing, ALS, then the texts, the phone calls, people, the whole community just blew up. So, they say good news travels fast, bad news travels even faster.
Yeah.
And, sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not. But John and I had taken enough time to fortify ourselves that we were somewhat more prepared to handle it because the shock had worn off for us. But we were dealing now with a community that was in shock.
Yeah. And so in that, like, hearing you guys talk about taking, that time, which is so important to kind of get all yourself figured out before you open this up to the rest of the world. But it really is that how did you take care of yourself in that time? And, after talking to your boys, how did you, take care of them?
Well, here's what I will tell you is that I had asked my husband, now that we have this news, what is it? What's on your bucket list? What do you really, really, really want to do? Do you want to go climb Mount Everest? Do you want to sail around the world? Do you want to meet a famous celebrity? What do you want to do while you still can? And he looked at me and he said, Rachel, I just want to keep life as normal
Mm.
as we possibly can. And Megan, there's something really solid about that in that I don't think I really realized it at the time, but the routine of our life for as long as we could keep it was something that provided some comfort
Mm.
actually for all of us.
Yeah.
And the thing about a disease like this is that it progresses. When you're living with someone who has it, you're aware of what's going on, but because you're living in it and with it, sometimes you just don't notice the progression
Mm.
as dramatically as someone looking in from the outside,
Yeah.
right? So for our boys, it became normal for them to help me with daddy, help me get him in and out of the bed. It just because that was just what our life, one of the
Yeah.
components of our life, getting daddy in the wheelchair, getting him into church, da da da, out on the football field, the lacrosse field, wherever it might be. So in that regard, keeping things, I guess, as normal
Mm.
we could, brought some comfort, I think, especially to our boys who were just they were just so young.
Yeah. Is there anything that you did personally to help you during this journey?
Girl, I was talking to Jesus nonstop, nonstop. I grew up in a very, faith-filled family. I had all of the knowledge. I knew all the stories, all the people in the
Mhm.
Bible. You name it, I could tell you, I knew. This changed my whole
Mm.
relationship in terms of, I got to the end of myself. And when we get to the end of ourself, because then it's all about him
Mm.
and only him. And my prayer for that first year was, I don't know how to do this.
Mm.
I've never helped anybody die. I've never helped anybody finish well. How do you do this?
Yeah.
Like, because here I believed, Megan, I believed if anybody was going to get healed of this, it was going to be my husband.
Mm.
I really carried that in my heart for at least 2 years. I don't doubt that our God works miracles.
Yeah.
We see them. We meet people who are a testimony to that. So I thought, and it wasn't going to be because of anything I did. It was just going to be the goodness of God saying, "Okay, John's good. Okay." And so that just carried me forward for a while. And then I had to come to that place where I realized, and I had several pastors say, Rachel, John's probably not going to,
Mm.
his healing will not come on this side. I'm like, okay, but I wasn't ready
Mm.
to go there just yet. And when I finally did, I had to just once again just say, okay, Lord, I'm at the end of my rope again. Here I am. You're going to lead us through this. You're not leaving us. I know that.
Mm.
You're gonna be right here in the midst of all of this with us. And he has been,
Mm.
he's continued to be. And and that's the one thing that I want so many people to understand is that, I don't believe that God makes us ill. He doesn't make us sick. He doesn't want that for us. And in those moments when we're in this hard space, he's there. We may not feel him, or we may not really truly internalize it, but he is always with us.
Yeah, and that's such a hard, like, grief process to go through because a lot of times I've talked about this a lot before is like grief, we always just see it as after somebody passes, but there's so much grief as we're living life and what we're going through. And so to even be walking through that grief of while he was still here and the sickness was, present, this disease, but then afterwards, like, was that a shift of that grief during the time and then after?
Oh, huge.
Yeah.
I mean, you start grieving the life that you thought you were gonna
Mhm.
have. We all have this picture of happily ever after,
Right.
don't we? And we have this great idea of what our life is supposed to look like. And no, you start grieving immediately, and that's why that year was so
Mm.
important for John and I to do some of that, because the life that we thought we were going to have growing old together was just not going to be. And in doing that, then Megan, we get involved with the busyness of life
Mhm.
that takes us away from sometimes being really present in our relationship with ourself and each other, and with our God. And what I realized was that period, I was so busy taking care,
Mm.
that grieving was a subconscious. It was locked really deep, deep away.
Mm.
And then after John died, it was still locked away because the focus was all on my boys.
Mhm.
So for me, I don't even know that the extent of it really became known to me, my own grief for years after John was gone, because I was so consumed with taking care of the family as it existed then. And my older son, started down the road of addiction, and
Mhm.
that was a whole nother challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's go into that a little bit. Talking about the after effects of what happens, even just like you're talking about in your family, but in families maybe you've seen or things like that. Somebody may be listening to this and they're going through either that beginning process and they're just finding out, or it's afterwards and they're at that loss of what to do. Like, what's some of those things that kind of you've seen or you experienced?
Life is different. And I think there are days when you think, I don't know how to do this. And B, I don't want to do this.
Mm,
I don't want my
mm,
life to be like this. And that is totally normal. Please know that. I mean, one of the first things I tell my boys is whatever you're feeling about your dad's death, it's not right or
mm,
wrong. And I think that's so important about the grieving process, or when you've received news or there's a loved one that's in jeopardy
mm,
for whatever reason it may be. Whatever you're feeling, don't discount that. There's a reason for it, and you need to acknowledge it. You may not need to sit in it forever, but you do need to recognize that there is a reason for it. And I think the thing too, for me especially, was, as a mother with small boys, I felt like I needed to fix it.
mm.
And we all know too, there are some things that can't be fixed. And there are some questions that can't be answered.
Yeah.
Only Jesus has the answer. And sometimes we get the answer, sometimes we don't. We have to be okay to just sit with that. I think that for me at that time, it was difficult because I didn't have another me out there. There wasn't somebody I could call and say, how did you handle this when, after your husband died? Or how did you, and Megan, seriously, within 6 months of my husband dying, there was a very well-known guy in our community.
Mm.
He had been a baseball player with the Twins, and he dropped dead of a heart attack
Oh,
while he was working out. And his wife called me. We had not really been friends, but we lived,
yeah.
in the same community. And she called me and she goes, Rachel, where's the handbook?
Hmm.
How do you do this? And I found that I was able to offer her a little bit of guidance. Not, I didn't have it all figured out myself, but that connection, that connection that fortifies us, knowing that we are not in this by
Mm.
ourselves. And and because it can be very isolating, caregiving can
Yeah.
be very isolating. And then when you find yourself, I mean, I was widowed at 49.
Mm.
That's still fairly young. A lot of people have this picture in their mind that widows are 87 years old and it's Aunt, right? Okay. No, it's not. It's happening at a younger and younger age. And so it made things easier when I found that I could connect with others who had had somewhat
Yeah.
of a similar experience.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's literally, I think I say every podcast is like find somebody to talk to because one, you're not alone, even though your experience may be specific to you, but like overall, like people are having the same thoughts, the same feelings, and you're not alone in that. So always talk to somebody.
It's so important, and I remember I found a faith-based therapist
Mhm.
after John was diagnosed, because I was like, "Okay, I don't know how to help anybody
Mm.
die. How do I stay standing after we've gone through this?" And it's so interesting because I walked into her office one day and I said, "Nancy, I don't understand. I love Jesus. I've got a ton of faith. Why am I exhausted? Why am I worn out? Why am I cranky? Isn't my faith, shouldn't it be enough? It should be easier to do this, right? It should be easier." And she looked at me, Megan, and she said, "Rachel, Jesus was a man and he had 12 guys helping him out. You're not Jesus, but you probably need to have some people helping you out." And I just thought, I never thought of it that I never ever thought of it that way. But it made it then much easier for me to realize that community, whatever people could however they could support me. It didn't have to be perfect,
Mm.
but whatever it was, however they wanted to help, I needed to be willing to accept that. It didn't mean that I was failure or less than. It just meant that community was important.
The nail on the head right there for everything. It's so true because we're not meant to
Exactly.
do this alone. And life is hard as it is. We need some people to come alongside us and be safe people for us and to help us along. So in that same breath, if someone is listening and they're going through this very similar experience, or they've just found out their loved one has whatever it may be, and they're walking through this, what advice would you give them? What would you say to them, somebody that's currently walking through it or have just lost somebody? I know there's no right words, like there's nothing you can do to make it better, but what are some things and even maybe tips or tricks that helped you along the way? I know you just mentioned talking to somebody, a therapist, a counselor. I'm always going to advocate for that.
So for me, journaling, writing, quiet time, my house had been so chaotic
Mm.
for so long that, and I know a lot of people sometimes are like, I was alone, but I wasn't necessarily lonely. And my children made it easier. My boys kept me connected. I had to get up in the
Mhm.
morning and take care of them. So, in that regard, I think it did make things a little easier. If the kids are gone and out of the house, that can be a little more difficult. But I think that it is so important to find those things that you enjoy or explore some of those things that you've always thought about,
Yeah.
but maybe didn't have the time to do. You've been caregiving, maybe that, that's for a younger person, or I don't have the talent to paint or sing or try a course or learn something. It's so important to stay engaged, and it can take a little while. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that it can happen overnight, but it takes work. Okay, this doesn't come
Yeah.
easily. And it's not going to happen the first time out. So go easy on yourself. Give yourself some grace to say, okay, hands up. I'm done for the day. I did get out of bed. I got dressed.
Yeah.
I went to the grocery store. So, okay,
Win.
I'm done for today, right? Or I got out, I took a walk, sat in the sun. I, made a phone call to family or a friend. Okay, I think that it's important to just recognize how much energy you have for things and then how to conserve that energy as well. And I wish there was a quick
Mhm.
fix. We all grieve differently. And what I do know is that grief changes. And I think it's our faith that allows the softening of the grief and allows it to change. Those people, they may have left us physically, but they never leave us emotionally. And I believe too that sometimes our hearts are broken so that more love can come
Mm.
into them. And it may show up in a way that you never, ever imagined. So try to keep yourself open to a new experience or to some new people that may come across your path, a support group. There may be a grief group at your church
Mm.
that can be very helpful too in finding other people who can understand where you are and what you're going through.
Yeah, I love the line of just having patience with yourself, giving yourself grace. So many areas of our life that we need to do that we are so hard on ourselves and we don't feel like we didn't get this and this done, that we feel like we've failed something. And in all reality, we've not. We've just put ourselves and held ourselves to a higher level than we needed to in these moments, and in moments of grief, to allow yourself to have patience with it, give yourself grace, and to realize that it really does come in waves. And you're going to have times where you feel like, okay, I've gotten to this place, like I feel more at peace. I feel like I'm back into a routine, and something, a smell, a sound, music, whatever it may be, is going to bring that whole sensation and just overwhelm you with it. That's not a bad thing.
You are absolutely right. The grief never goes away. And I think there's a gift in
Mm-hmm.
that because I think it just makes us appreciate our ability to appreciate grows so
Mm-hmm.
much more because of what we have suffered.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. And I appreciate you so much for sharing your story. I know we just really just barely scratched the surface of it, but I will post in the show notes and have your links in there if people want to hear more of your story, read your memoir, all those things, if it's something they're going through and struggling with. And so I just want to again say thank you for being a part of this and just being vulnerable enough to share some of these pieces of your life, because that's such an important thing as we're in the, awareness month for ALS, and then in the awareness month for mental health. Like you said at the very beginning, those things can go hand in hand because mental health is such a big piece of all of our lives. I say it all the time. We have to treat it just like our physical health and keep it in check and watch it and find ways to manage it to help us live our best life. And it's a huge piece. And so I, again, just thank you for being a part of this and being on here today.
Well, thank you, Megan. And thank you for what you are doing. To your point, mental health didn't have the focus and the attention 15 years ago
Yeah.
that it has now. So what a blessing that is that we as a community have been able to bring that front forward too. You may remember the ALS Ice Bucket
Right.
Challenge. There is now a group of young students at a university in South Carolina who have created a mental health ice
Mhm.
bucket challenge. I think it's a great way to bring the two together and as a reminder, yes, to all of us that our mental health is so important, and that yes, there are still people suffering with ALS
Mhm.
as well, so we can
Yeah.
support them both.
Yeah, but like I say every time, if you're struggling, if you need somebody to talk to, please reach out to somebody, find a safe person. And if you don't have one, my email is in the show notes as well. Reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help find somebody that you can talk to or talk to you myself. And yeah, we are in this together. I think that sums up a whole lot of this whole episode is we've got to be in this together.
Thanks for listening to Real Talk with Megan. Remember, you are not alone. Seeking help is a sign of strength, and taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health. We'll see you next time for more honest conversations.